Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning to continue our academic agenda for today as part of the Engineering Education International Meeting, ACOFI 2020. My name is Humberto Gomez, Associate Professor at the Mechanical Engineering Department at Universidad del Norte. And I have the great honor to host our special guest for today, Dean of the Edward E. Whitaker Jr. College of Engineering at Texas Tech University and former payload specialist astronaut on the Space Shuttle Columbia on shuttle mission STS-73 in 1995, Dr. Albert Sacco Jr. Good morning, Al. Thank you very much for being with us today.
I'm happy to be here. I wish I was there in person. Columbia is so beautiful, but instead,
well, yeah, this is new times for all of us, right?
Exactly.
And this time, we have also had the pleasure in the past to have you in different academic conferences scenarios here in Colombia. But this time we are in this new format for our meeting, a new reality for all of us. But life goes on, and that's the reason why the first words of this discussion with you is a new normal, right? So we're living under a new normal, and a new normal brings new challenges, new developments. So that's the main title of our discussion for today. So let me start with just your first thoughts in the video that you have the chance to share with us in advance. Just taking your words related to that, as an institution, as a program, as a faculty, as an academic administrator, we have a mission, right? And this mission right now, we're conducting the mission every day in a journey. But of course, the journey brings challenges, and it might be uncomfortable for all of us, right, to be under these circumstances. But from all your experience, also all what you have to deal during your career as an astronaut and in space, you share with us these measures. We have to be comfortable with the comfortable. So I would like to begin from there with your initial thoughts and reflection in terms of that related to our engineering education initiatives right now.
Yes. Well, I think the COVID pandemic will change higher education forever. It will redefine the roles of the teacher researcher, and all of us, including our students, are going to have to become what I call comfortable with being uncomfortable. And when you're in the astronaut corps, they teach you and train you to feel like whatever happens, you're ready for it, because you just assume that you're always going to be uncomfortable, something's going to be happening. So it becomes a part of the way you operate. And I think the new reality right now is that, for example, we have to, you're seeing everybody recording lectures. That's different for faculty, right? Some do it very well, some have difficulty. We have to learn how to do that. We have to learn from YouTube, right? What do the kids look at or you look at when you want to fix your refrigerator? You call up a YouTube video, right? So we have to learn how to do that. We'll have to learn how to be more interactive in terms of the modules that we use. And we also have to learn a lot of different methodologies, because now we have to be lifelong learners. And what I mean by that is, for the first time ever, we have to adjust to this pandemic, right, in a very quick way in order to deliver a quality education. For example, how many face-to-face classes do we really need, you know, in engineering? I mean, if we can do things online, I mean, you learn engineering by doing it. So what you're going to see is a switch from the classroom modalities to a modality where you have learning spaces where people come in to do things, but they don't come in to just sit next to each other and listen to a lecture. And by the way, we probably should have got rid of that mode years ago, because that's from hundreds of years ago, and we just never changed. We never got in touch with the new realities. COVID-19 is forcing us into that change. It's also going to mean, do we need as many buildings? What kind of buildings do we need? What's the cost structure going to be associated with education? What's the college experience going to look like in the future? Right? It's going to be different.
Correct.
How are students going to socialize in the future? I mean, one of the things with online learning is you don't socialize, and you need to socialize as a human being in order to develop, because part of what we develop is not only a great engineer and scientist, but we also develop a good human being, and that comes from interactions with each other. How are we gonna set that up and make that happen? And the other reality, I'm sure you're all getting a part of this, at least I do, is suddenly the work week is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's no boundaries, right? They call you up in the middle of the night, they Zoom you at a 10 o'clock meeting, 10 at night, 6 in the morning, 5 in the morning. So the whole reality of how we teach and how we educate, what we need to teach and what we need to educate, we have to begin to look at changes. And what that's going to mean, you're going to hear me say this over and over again, is we now have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Correct. So from your insights, of course, this is going to be a new normal in terms of higher education, in terms of the institution, the purpose of higher education institutions. What we can expect from now? I mean, in terms of the changes in the institution as a whole.
Well, as I mentioned before, we're going to be looking at things like how do we change the classroom to be more of a learning space, which will be a more, you learn engineering and you learn science by doing it, not by listening to it. So all the classrooms are going to start to change into learning spaces. And we can start learning that now, and we're doing some of that, as I'm sure you are, in order to have hands-on experience, but we're doing it in a way that we keep social distancing at the same time. You know, in the future, when the pandemic's over, we're going to end up still staying online. I mean, we surveyed all our students, and we have 7,000 students here in engineering. They love recorded lectures. What they don't like is never seeing their friends and being together at all. But the lecture part they like because they can go over it again and again and again. So they like the recorded lectures. They like that a lot. But as I said before, you're going to learn engineering by doing. So what we're thinking about doing, one of the things, is all lectures will be online. And when you come to class, you'll be just doing problems, or you'll be working with equipment, but there'll be no lecturing in class. It will all be hands-on learning based on what you learned from the lecture material. And so that means the classrooms won't have, they'll have movable tables and seats. They won't have, you know, rows and rows for people to sit in. All that's going to start going away, and we're already starting to plan for that because that's going to be the engineer of the future and the educational future.
Okay, you mentioned something which is really interesting and also related to what we, as part of what we promote in these conferences every year, and is promoting the excellence and the quality in educations. So you think as these new challenges emerge, definitely what should be the approach in terms of stick to the excellence and the commitment with the quality in education in our engineering programs?
Yes. Well, first of all, I think all of us realize that quality has to be number one. We always have to have quality number one. I believe the COVID-19 virus has pushed us and pushed the students, and they will be the most versatile and I think creative engineers and scientists the world's ever seen. And the reason for that is the day of the passive learner is over. They have to engage in their education. They have to learn how to use the new media. They have to be engaged more. And you know, the more you're engaged, the more you learn, right? That's how you learn by doing. So the days of the passive learner is over. Students are going to learn how to learn, right? They are no longer going to be passive, sitting there listening. They're going to be doing things always, even doing things where they try to use different electronic media to do things. They're going to constantly be learning how to do things. And again, they have to become comfortable with being uncomfortable because there's going to be no norms anymore. It's going to be, this is what we're going to do this week, this is what we're going to do next week. They have to learn by doing, not by just listening. They need to take charge of their education more. And additionally, faculty need to know how to teach through motivational techniques and entertainment, right? Because the kids need to be entertained and motivated. And to do that on a film is difficult, but you can learn how to do it. And they also have to be, faculty have to be very organized. because the students are going to start demanding certain things based on what they learn. Because remember, they not only listen to a lecture on you, they can go on YouTube and say, tell me about heat transfer, and some of the best heat transfer videos from the best experts in heat transfer are out there for nothing, right? So they're going to lock into a lot of different things. So the faculty is going to have to, as we put it in English, up their game, you know, like in basketball. They're going to have to become very, very good at what they do. They're going to have to become a lot better at what they do. It's going to be a lot more interactive in the sense that faculty are going to have to recognize that they're going to be asked a lot of tough questions online, real time, or in these groups, and they need to have the confidence not only to answer them, but more importantly, and this is what I tell my young faculty, if you don't know, just don't try to make up an answer. Just say, you know, I don't know, I'm going to look it up. It's going to be a very interactive style of education, and I think it's going to produce the best and most creative engineers and scientists ever. I think this awful pandemic is really going to drive education off its old way of doing things for the first time ever, because it doesn't have an option. It has to do that. And it's going to get students involved. It's going to get everybody involved. And it's going to be hard because, believe me, been training to be an astronaut for many years and flying a couple of times, it's difficult to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's not the norm. We all want to settle in. We get our coffee in the morning. We do the same thing. Human beings have a comfort zone to do the same things, teach the same material, teach it the same way, right? Those days are gone. It's going to be constant change, constant update. And once you get comfortable with being uncomfortable, then you're comfortable. And it's not a big deal. But it's going to take several years for folks to learn how to do that. That's not going to be easy. And some people may opt out of being in education because it's not going to be the same anymore.
Right.
It's going to be very
different. Correct. Correct. So as you mentioned, as a faculty also, and probably in your departments at your college, you are working a lot of methodologies and new strategies, embedding technology, just to work with the purpose of improve or come up with new ideas in the way that we teach. But at the same time, an academic program might be also involved in a social commitment with the society around, and also in terms of the research. So how to balance, because I'm pretty sure that you're having the same discussions with your faculty. So yeah, I'm involved in all these kind of methodologies for the teaching, but at the same time, we have to come up and do something with the research. What has been your strategy in terms to balance both aspects, the teaching and the research in the middle of the situation?
Yeah, the research is interesting. It's really the number of publications have doubled since this happened, and that's, I think, because faculty have learned how to use the internet effectively here, and so they spend more time writing research papers. What's been a difficulty for us, and what we're still struggling with, is how to maintain a safety factor in the laboratories. So what we're doing now is we're staggering it. We have 1 or 2 people in a lab so they can social distance and wear their mask, let's say for 5 hours in the morning, and then another 1 or 2 or 3 in the afternoon, then another 2 or 3 at night, and it goes to late at night. So it depends on when you were, rather. So they don't work a typical day anymore, like 8 to 6 or 8 to 7. They'll work in smaller groupings, but there'll be 4 or 5 different groups in order to keep them socially distanced. And then they're learning a lot of discipline, which is good by research. They're learning to clean when they come in, wipe things down, clean when they leave. So their experimental techniques are getting better. And interestingly enough, I thought that would slow down the research, but it seems to be speeding it up. So I don't really know why that's the case, but we are publishing at a much greater rate than we were before. We're putting out more proposals than we ever did before. And we're meeting our teaching obligation. Now, I would say in the teaching obligation, we're still having issues. The primary issue, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, is how do you give an exam and all that kind of stuff, and how do you maintain the fact that people aren't cheating on the exam and those kind of things. But the research endeavor has gone surprisingly well, but we've done it by staggering the people coming in that have hands-on research. Of course, the research folks that do modeling, we've allowed them to take, the graduate students to take those systems home with them. So they actually bring their computers, and we have a great bandwidth here, so they're able to do their modeling at home. They don't even have to come in, and we don't have them come in. We have them meet online. But those that are doing experimental work, we do it in 4 or 5 hour chunks throughout about a 24-hour period. So some of them their time to come in maybe from 1 to 6 in the morning, and that's what their time is to do their research. So it's changed a lot of things in the way we do them. That's one thing I'm hoping that we can maintain the productivity. Like it's up, it's really up, it's amazing. Maintain the productivity, but have normal hours when the pandemic is over, when we come up with a solution to this. But right now, what we're doing is we're staggering it, around the clock operation.
Right. Yeah. So as you mentioned, this situation at some point it will be over. I mean, it has to stop at some point. We don't know yet the final circumstances and the final outcome, but it will be over at some point. So we say that at the very end, we will become stronger, right? That's part of what we are learning now, because with all these methodologies, all these changes that we have to, implement in a very short period of time, changes that might take otherwise under different circumstances 2 years, 3 years, we have done this in a matter of 2 or 3 months. So taking into account all of this, what do you think will be the most significant development in your college and for your programs as a stronger program, as a stronger college, once this is over?
Yeah, I think like we sort of touched on before, I think learning in the future will be a mixture of modalities, both digital and hands-on. As I talked about, the way we're looking at it is we're looking at doing all the lecture materials digitally, because you can bring in examples from the web, you can do all sorts of other things, and then the classroom meeting times will be all hands-on related activity, whether it's solving homework problems together. I also think that all classrooms will be re-engineered to be learning spaces consistent with that. So we'll get rid of these tiered classrooms with just 200 seats in them. All those will go away. Students will be more engaged in their education. They've had to be the last few years. So there'll be no more passive learners, and they will not want to go back to the old way of doing things. They'll be done with that. And the faculty is the one to worry about, because a lot of the faculty are going to want to go back because that's their comfort zone, and they need to get out of that. And then I think you're going to have group learning is going to become even more important, both digitally and face-to-face. And the new norm, they will learn from each other and each other. So I think they're not only going to learn from the teacher, but they're going to start learning from each other. You're going to have them in groups when they do problems. Well, why did you do this? And Harvard does that now. I don't know if you know, Harvard had problems with, everybody has to take physics at Harvard. And they were having trouble, of course, with liberal arts people taking physics, like a history major taking physics, because they really don't want to take it. But in the liberal arts education in Harvard, they require them to take it. So a faculty member that came up with a great idea, and I think this is going to translate. And what he did was he would give a physics test individually like we do now before COVID hit, and then he would give the same test to groups of 5, and then it averaged the 2 exams. And what he found out is he went from only like a 20% pass rate for people that were non-STEM, science technology people, to an 85% pass rate. Because what happened was the students learned from each other, right? They would get in these groups, go over the same test and say, well, why did you do this? I did this this way. And they would discuss with each other. And over the period of time, their individual exams would increase in their ability to pass them. So what I'm trying to say is that we need to turn every student not only into a learner, but into a teacher. And when we do that, they begin to interact with each other, learn with each other. They get excited about it. And I think that's a great outcome that is going to be pushed by this COVID-19. We're going to have to do these things. And so, unfortunately, like all of us, I taught thermodynamics for 25 years, and, everybody gets an equilibrium point, and they like to stay there. And to get them off of it, you really have to put quite an input into it, right, to get it to go to a new equilibrium point, and not the global equilibrium point. They're usually, metastable points. But the bottom line is that we need to push the faculty. The students are going to push us. I mean, after this stuff, there's going to be, I want those lectures online. I'm already getting requests from students that say, Professor so-and-so didn't put all the lectures online. He just gives them to them just before. I want to study them ahead of time. I want them online ahead of time, so I know how to do this homework problem. I want to get ahead of the course. I want to do this. So students are already getting engaged, and it's only going to get more and more engaged. And I think that's a good thing. I think that's going to create these very versatile engineers that are very creative, that learn a lot of what we learn when we get out of school. They're going to learn it when they're in school, how to be creative, how to solve problems, how to look up information when they need it. They're going to gain a lot of confidence in themselves. And I think, this pandemic is really going to result in a much better educational system. But it's going to be hard, first for the students, but they're going to adjust because they're younger. They don't have this deep seated way of doing things. So I think that we need to take advantage of that. And the faculty is the one that's going to have to really think about that, because a lot of us are going to say, oh, we're going to make up all sorts of excuses like, oh, they won't look at the videos. We can't do that. Well, I get news for you. I sit in on faculty lectures sometimes, and the kids are looking at their phones instead of what the lecturer is saying, So it's not a matter of their attention span. It's a matter of whether they have enough time to spend listening to that material. So the more that's online, the more they can look at it again and again, the more they're going to get it. And then they're going to start asking tough questions because they're going to, if you don't explain something right, they're going to probe it because they're going to have time to think about it, to look it up in a book, to say, geez, that doesn't seem consistent with what I've heard. So it's going to change the way we teach. It's going to require the faculty to be much more open to discussion than many of our colleagues are. But the end result is going to be just an outstanding, high quality, creative, very versatile student that is used to changing on the spot what they need to change. And that's a good thing for society. That's a good thing for all of us. And by the way, you talked about society, how we're going to interact with society. One of the things we're doing here, we require all our kids to have an international experience. Well, what we're requiring now is that if we can't travel internationally, then we want them to work in wherever they live with their community and give us, I don't know what it is, 45 hours of community service. So they integrate into their various communities all over the United States and help the local community. Now they're doing it by helping in hospitals or food banks or just a whole variety of different areas. So we're also using this as an opportunity to get our students out in the community, helping out, and it's now part of the degree requirement. So we've turned, we love them to go abroad. They mature, they do a lot of other things, but in lieu of that, we've taken advantage of them working in their community, getting more engaged with the issues of their community, whatever that happens to be, as part of their degree requirement. So we're taking advantage of that too. Excuse me.
All right. So from all this information that you share, what I think is very valuable, definitely the face-to-face education is going to change. I mean, just the students assuming the role of teachers, the redefinition of working as a team for the students with the resources that they have, definitely is going to change, as you mentioned. But let me try to narrow a little bit more in terms of what you mentioned, hands-on experience. The new reality is that we have been developing and implementing a lot of infrastructure in terms of labs, in terms of lab spaces, in terms of lab equipments. So what are you doing right now in order to, I have this infrastructure, but right now under these circumstances, I have to change my methodology. What do you think is going to be the redefinition of a traditional lab, especially for us in engineering programs, for our hands-on experiences?
Yeah, let me start by saying what we're trying to do right now. This is, of course, a big challenge. We have a variety, excuse me, of different modalities. We do have some face-to-face laboratories where we have small groups. And what we do is, instead of having 5 small groups in a lab, we'll have 2. So they're socially distanced. We allow them to work on equipment, but always stay 6 or 2 meters apart from each other. We do that. But that's difficult to get through all the lab experiences we need to do. So another thing we do is we do a sort of a hybrid, where we'll have one group member or a TA run the experiment. It will be videoed. In other words, there'll be a camera looking at the experiment, what they're doing, and one of the group members will talk to the other people in the group, and they'll say, yeah, now I want you to put the pump on now, and he'll go over and he'll be their arms and legs. By the way, not unlike what we did on the shuttle when we had very complicated experiments, I was the hands, eyes, and the person that operated their experiment with their direction coming up from the ground. So not unfamiliar to what we used to call teleperformance in the shuttle program and on the International Space Station. It's very similar. So you'll have a group of students that are working on a project. One of them will go into the lab to do the experiment. So now, instead of getting 2 groups in, you can have 5 groups in, because there's only one kid representing each of those groups in all 5 experiments. And they're 5 or 6 feet, or actually more, they're more like 10 or 12 feet away from each other. And they have a computer open, and they're listening to their group, and their group would say, do this, do that. What is the reading? And they're taking down the readings electronically. So they have one guy doing the experiment and everybody else telling him how to do it and what data to take. So that's another way we're doing it. Very much like we did on the International Space Station and like we did in the shuttle program. Another way we're trying to do is we're looking more into what the Germans started many years ago, which is 3D simulations and dynamic response, which are like aircraft flight simulators. So they get on their computer, and it's very much like a 3D image of whatever they happen to do with a pump. And the beauty of that is they not only see it, and when they change a switch, it goes on, it goes off, it responds as if it's actually on. It's all 3D video, it's all electronic, but it has the same response factors as does a normal pump. But the beauty of it is you can actually cut it away, and you can get inside and look at what's happening inside the pump. And for example, if you're pumping a liquid, you can introduce the little bubbles, and you can watch cavitation and why cavitation is a problem with pumps. So it can be a very effective learning experience. And there's another way we're doing it too, is we have the TAs run the experiment. The students are looking in on their computers, and then they, again, sort of this teleperformance, they're told how to do things, and then we give them various data sets, because a big part of running experiments is analyzing the data. So we give them different data sets to do and to analyze, and that part is the same as it would be normally. It's just that they don't have the hands-on experience. So right now, those are the ways that we're doing things. I think in the future, when the pandemic is over, I think everybody's going to be doing those experiments, but I do think that the 3D simulations and dynamic response stuff will be a part of their experiments. They'll do that first, so they have a electronic feel of what's going to happen, and then they'll physically do it when the pandemic is over. But right now, those are the 4 modalities that we're using at the institution. Electrical engineering does one set, mechanical engineering a different, chemical engineering different, and they're all sometimes within a discipline, they're using different modalities to see which one works best with their students.
Okay. Let me now switch a little bit for the academic administration side. All right. So definitely this situation change the way that you work with your teams. So team working right now, you know, as you said, it might be easy in the way that we have access to technology, we have flexible schedules, but in terms of having everybody interacting, building relationships, you know, it might be difficult. So under these circumstances, what do you think is it has to be the role of the leader in a team, in an academic administration, for example?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, that's a very difficult question. I wish I had a great answer for it, but I don't. The problem is, you know, what I try to do as an academic leader is motivate our students to get excited about the changes, to get excited about the fact that I really do believe in my heart of hearts that they're going to be the best engineers ever produced in this world. That's going to be across the whole globe, because they have to be able to adjust, and they have to be able to learn things on the spot, new things. They're going to gain confidence with themselves. But the socialization part, you know, really, it's a difficult one. Now, what we try to do is get them to meet in safe ways where they're 2 meters apart. They're 6 feet apart from each other. But that's not really socialization very much, right? So we try to get them to meet in groups in controlled environments. So we don't let them meet in any area as a group meeting with more than 10 people in it. We recommend they meet outside because it's safer to meet outside. They have their masks on. We have a faculty member there that's there to try to sort of have them talk about their results, talk about experiments. What is happening in the United States, and that's why we have such a big infection rate, is they go back to their apartments and they meet by themselves in groups because you can't take socialization away from them, and they take off the masks and they have a beer and then everything happens, right? Just like it normally would. So that's where the socialization is happening. It's happening outside of school, but it's also driving infection rates up. So we're trying to tell them, discourage that and say, yeah, you can do that, but don't have as many people in your apartment, only have 2 or 3. But they're teenagers and they're young adults. They're not, you know, they just do what they want to do. So we haven't been successful with that. I don't have really a good answer for any of that stuff, because they have to socialize, but at the same time, they have to socialize in a way that doesn't put them or their parents or their faculty at risk. And that's the difficult part, because as young people, if they don't have some underlying condition, this is not going to negatively affect them other than a bad cold. But what it can affect is their parents, their grandparents. And I know in Hispanic cultures, you're very close to your family and your parents and your grandparents. That's the danger of what many students, at least in the U.S., are doing, and I suspect all over the world, because young people are young people. I mean, you're not going to stop them from socializing outside of class. We can only control it inside of class. But I do send out a lot of videos, and one of the things I do is I have all our alums that are head of corporations. So we have a lot of them that are head of major corporations like Exxon and just a whole bunch of major corporations. I have them set out a video that talks about what they expect their employees to do, which is to wear a mask, social distance, don't get into loud crowds, you know, that kind of thing. And so every week we send out a different video from an alum that is working, and is the head of a corporation, that tells them, listen, it's very important that you not only do this in school and when you're studying, but you do this on weekends and holidays, because it's the only way we're going to stop this virus is if we behave ourselves. And, you know, I tell the faculty the same thing. The faculty's pretty good. The staff's pretty good. The students, some of them are good, some of them not so good. But we're trying a lot of different ways to motivate them to, as part of safety. You know, safety is a big part of engineering, as you know, in the STEM fields. And we pride ourselves on safety in all we do. So I also have a video that I send out to all the students that talks about, this is a part of engineering safety. You learn safety with equipment, but this is safety now, protecting yourself and your neighbors. And that's part of being a good engineer. And then when they get these videos from these CEOs of major corporations like Exxon and Phillips Petroleum and, you know, all the different corporations, international corporations. They realize that it's not just me saying it, but it's when they get out in the workplace, they're expected to do it as well. So we try to influence that as much as we can. And that's kind of the way we're trying to address all those things. We are encouraging socialization, but in a safe manner. And I wish I
we
had
have
better.
a question from. Oh, sorry, are you done?
Oh, yeah, I just said I
Yeah.
wish I had a better answer
No,
for
I mean
that.
that's excellent. You know, I mean it's part of the reality, and I think that at the same time, under these circumstances, we are all of us in the middle of a big experiment. I mean, we're doing our best. We're trying new things. Some of them might work. Some of them might not work. But we have to move on. I mean, but we have to try. At least we have to
Right.
try. And
We have
and
to
and,
keep
and,
innovating.
correct. Yeah. So let me link this with a question that we have from the audience. And it says, like, in your opinion, which is the key for the success in the application of the methodologies that you have been mentioned for the education in this new reality? We have the methodology. I think we would like to implement this, but what is going to be the key in terms of success? Or how do you measure
Well,
the success for that?
well, first of all, I think the key is going to be buy-in that your faculty, your staff, and to a certain extent your students, I think the students will be the easy part, realize that they have to change the way they do things. You can't superimpose the way education used to be on the new reality. If you try to do that, you would not succeed. You know, you have to wipe that clean and say, if I was to start this all over again and this is the way it's always going to be, how am I going to change? So your faculty has to buy in, and that's that catchphrase I always use that we use in the astronaut office, being comfortable with being uncomfortable. So that's the real key thing, in my opinion. The other part is you've got to educate. You know, one of the things that we found here is I assumed, and you know what they say, assume makes an ass out of you and me. In English, that's the way it's spelled, right? But I assumed that our young faculty would be up to date on all this stuff, and I found out that even our young faculty wasn't as up to date as I thought they would be in using this stuff. In fact, some of our students were good at some aspects, but really bad at other aspects, the interactive aspects. They were used to being a passive learner off the web instead of being an interactive learner off the web. So all of us are learning this stuff. So we have to make people realize and make it fun to a certain extent, make it fun to learn. And one of the things that is going to result from this is all of us are going to turn out to be what they used to call, we want to create a lifelong learner. And that was just a catchphrase. No one ever was a lifelong learner. You learned what you did, you applied it, and that was it. You learned what you had to do to get by, and that was it. But now people are learning that it can be fun to be a lifelong learner. It'd be fun to learn how to do this. It's fun to learn how to do that. And oh yeah, I don't have to call that guy to fix my air conditioner. All I have to do is pull this YouTube thing off the web, and in 10 minutes I can figure out what I need to check and whether I really need someone to come in or I can fix it myself, right? So there's a lot of that going on, and people are getting excited about it. And that's why I think we're going to have better engineers and scientists and educators in the future than we've ever had before, because everybody's getting into this stuff. Even yours truly. I mean, I always did it in the astronaut office because that's the way we trained. A lot of the stuff that you guys, that we're doing presently, I was doing 20 years ago. They had videos, they had all sorts of stuff, simulations of equipment. They would simulate problems that were multi-layer deep and have us try to figure out how to solve them. And part of that is what made us comfortable with being uncomfortable. So it became a game. It became like, you know, I was trying to figure out how to do it and how to do it best and how to do it quick. And I think it produces a very, very creative mind, because your mind is always stimulated to look at new things, to try new things. And I think it's going to be awesome. I mean, I am so excited about the generation that's going to go through this, as crazy as that sounds, because I know they're being forced for the first time ever to use their minds in ways they've never thought of before, and the faculty as well. But the key to this whole thing is that the faculty doesn't try to push back and go back to the way we used to do things. They go back to, let's all sit in a lecture and talk. That's not the way you learn engineering. You learn engineering by doing it. Yeah, you need the lectures, but let them do the lectures on their time. Let them look at them as many times as they want. But when they're in class, they're doing things. They're doing engineering things. They're solving problems. They're asking you questions real time. I don't get this. Why isn't this working? I tried it this way. A lot of interactive learning. That's the future of higher education. That's going to produce just unbelievable technology changes, because kids are going to look at, kids, young adults, are going to look at things in a much different way, and they're going to demand answers. And we, the faculty, need to be up to the challenge. And it's going to be hard, because the faculty are not, they're used to sort of sitting there, and the student comes to them and bows to them and says, yes, I know you know everything. But we all know we don't know everything, right? And we learn what we need to know at a given time. So we need to be much more a conduit for education, a catalyst to connect people and connect educational modalities together so the student can learn best. And in order for us to do that, we have to stay current with everything that's going on. Not only know the basics in our field, but stay current in how they're being used and how we can exercise them in the future. And it's going to be all, in my opinion, it's going to be all interactive. It's going to be no more passive learning. Those days are gone.
We also need to learn how to change or how to adapt. It's in terms of evaluation. I think that I have this discussion with you before in terms of, yeah, we want to stay with our commitment and achieve the attainment of the student outcomes for our students and our parents. But at the same time, we have to deal with ethical aspect, honesty, everything around having the students doing an evaluations by using these new methodologies, right? I mean, there have been concerns that they cheat, there are concerns that they not only be honest. So what has been your experience in your college and in your parents in dealing with evaluations?
Yeah, that's in English we call that the 800-pound elephant in the room, the big thing in the room. We've done it in basically 4 different ways. We've looked at timed exam questions. So you give an exam question and you give them 6 minutes to do it, 7 minutes to do it. The reason, of course, for that is that they can text that to a group of folks that will, for money, will solve that problem and give it to them back, right? So we lock into those areas, as many of them as we know, these for-profit problem solvers in various areas. We learn what kind of time it takes them to answer a question, and we drop it down so that they can't use it. So that's one thing we do, time questions. That can be a problem because everybody answers things differently, but we've tried that. It's worked sometimes, hasn't worked other times. The other thing we've done is we've proctored what we call hyperflex exams with different problems. So what we'll do is we'll take, let's say, a class of 50 students. We'll divide it into groups of, or let's say 45 students, divide it into groups of 15, and we'll have a faculty member proctor them with 15, socially distanced with their masks on, take an exam, and then 2 days later we'll have another 15 from that class with a different problem or sets of problems, proctor that exam, and then on Friday we'll have the final with another set. Now what that requires from the faculty, and you can imagine the faculty doesn't like this, is 3 different exams to test the same principles. But that's the only way that we've gotten around this, the first group telling the second group what was on the exam. So that's one of the things we've done. We've also tried many of these commercial products where they say, oh, you go in and you can use these various things. The faculty, by and large, and I'm not going to name any because I don't want to say good or bad things about them, but most of the faculty has not liked any of those commercial ways to give exams. They haven't found it to be effective. They haven't found it to be effective in keeping people from being honest. They found students are very clever, and they find their ways around things. So they haven't done that either. So what we're looking at, what seems to work the best, but is also the one that's the most work, is these hyperflex classes where you make 3 different exams for the same principle that you're trying to test. But it requires the faculty, we try to give them a T-Day to grade it and all that stuff, but it's 3 different exams testing the same principle. And the students occasionally will say, well, my exam was harder than the other group's exam because it's hard to make them exactly the same. So there's issues with that too. But those are the 4 ways that we're looking at things. Again, face-to-face hyperflex exams, proctored exams, electronically timed exams, a combination of those sometimes. But we have not solved that problem yet, honestly. We're looking at a whole variety of different ways. Most of the time, what we try to do in the end is we try these hyperflex exams where we have kids come in. A lot of times what we'll do is stack them up. And what I mean by that is we'll have an exam at 1, an exam at 2, an exam at 3, so that they have to, and the faculty does that because they don't want to make up 3 exams. They want 1 exam, but they try to get it so they can't pass the information from one group to the next. But of course, the first group when we do that, can pass it to the third group. The second group won't get it, but the third group will get it because they're not going to go in for another hour. So that's the problem with that. So that cuts it down to 2 exams, which is a little bit more doable for the faculty. In other words, the first group and the second group will have the same exam because they're back to back, but then the third group will have a different exam. But then we get into the exams equivalent in difficulty. And so that's been a problem for us. But most of the faculty are going to some type of face-to-face exam, and they're dealing with, how do I get around it? How do I stop the cheating? Of course, the reason they're doing that is because they proctor the exam and they can see that no one's cheating. But they also can't have a lot of kids in the room doing it simultaneously. So what we've tried to do, but we haven't been able to schedule it at the university, the other thing we've tried to do is have the 3 groups in 3 different classrooms simultaneously and have 2 TAs proctor in 2 groups and the faculty member proctor in the other. But the problem is we haven't been able to schedule those classrooms at the same time all the time, because the exam periods are typically the same periods. The midterm, the finals, the exam periods are typically the same throughout the whole university, so all the rooms are being used by different groups. But that's all I can say about that. That is the big problem with the way we're.
But definitely, it is something that we are all working and trying to implement the best way to do it. As I say, to keep the balance, right? To ensure the attainment of our student outcomes, but at the same time, achieve a honest test and promote the ethics in our students. So yeah, but thank you very much for sharing this information. I think that are really valuable. That's one of the big questions, actually, that we have been, sharing and discussing in different academic scenarios here in Colombia. The way that we have to switch, change, or modify our evaluation processes. But let me go back to your role as the leaders of college in the relationship that you have with your teams in terms of the relationship with the departments. I mean, we know that these circumstances, we know, okay, this is a journey, right? Every day is a journey. And as we said, okay, at some point this will be over. But as I remember from a quote, the purpose of the journey is not the end, right? The purpose of the journey is not be thinking when it's going to be over, right? I mean, it's what's happening in between what really makes it interesting and the things that you can develop and challenge. So from your space career, one of the things that you have to deal all the time is with the uncertainty, right? I mean, there's uncertainty around. in everything that you do. So how do you deal with uncertainties with your academic teams in terms of, questions, what we are going to do, this is working, this is not working? How do you
Yeah.
deal with, maybe also create anxieties in your group, for example? So
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. Really, it's yeah, it's funny when I first get into this, I didn't realize that I was very comfortable with all these changes because that was my reality for years, right? So it just seemed like, okay, we got to change here, we got to do this. So I never sort of had the mental anxiety that many other of my colleagues have. And what I've learned is department chairs, center directors, faculty have different tolerances for this uncertainty. I've realized that faculty in general like to know exactly what to do and exactly when to do it. And I never thought of it that way. I never thought of faculty that way because, I was never in a position to think of it. In normal academics, you have a schedule, you give the exams the same way, you make up the exams in a similar way all the time, you teach it in a similar way, you refine your lectures a little bit, but more or less you're comfortable with being who you are. Where now everything is changing and the journey, as you put it, is changing. And you're exactly right. The importance of this pandemic and what we're going through is not the end of it, but rather what we learn during the journey and how we can continue to learn. And I think that the faculty needs to learn to be, again, I keep coming back with comfortable to being uncomfortable. So what I've done with my people is I've talked to them quite a bit, and I meet with my chairs. I have them over social distancing outside in my backyard, and we talk about things, what they're going through. And I talk about the fact that, yeah, this is just going to keep going. Every time you think you got a solution, it's going to change, and you got to make it. It's got to become fun for you. It's got to become okay, I know something's going to change. I'm not going to embed myself so much in this solution because I know it's going to change tomorrow. And the question I say to them all the time is, why don't you try to come up and tell me, and we sort of have a game, what I learned and what they are learning. Tell me what you learned about how you did things this week and what didn't work and what did and what you learned from that. And because I'm trying to get them to sort of think about the fact that no solution is absolute and no process is absolute. So they should just look at that as sort of putting a Band-Aid on a cut, right? And then tomorrow they change the Band-Aid. They put another Band-Aid on, right? Because every day they want a fresh Band-Aid. And so you need to think of these solutions as putting a Band-Aid on a cut, right? And think about it and think what you learned from that. And so I spend a lot of time doing that, and I will say it's worked. I mean, I went from a very anxious leadership group that were being pressured by faculty that were very anxious to a leadership group now that's less anxious, less agitated, that doesn't get really upset when, the administration and, the administration above me I'm talking about, they're constantly asking for information. Give us new modalities. How are you going to teach in the fall? How are you going to teach? And then 2 weeks later, they want to change again. And the faculty says, we just spent all that time. And I said, I know, but this is putting a Band-Aid on a Band-Aid. When things change, you have to be willing to change. And I will tell you, that's what's going to make a better faculty member and a better student, because when you adopt that philosophy that change is good, change is healthy, and I don't get stressed out about it, then life becomes much easier, because life is full of changes, right? I mean, when things happen and how you adjust to those changes, how you respond to those changes determines your success in life and how you enjoy your life. The old saying that it's your attitude that determines your altitude, right? It's the way you think that determines how high you're going to go, right? And it's the same in academics and the same in the upper administration. And I talk to my leadership team all the time. I also talk to the faculty. They'll call me and say, I can't believe this, and this is happening. And this kid showed up and he said he thought he was COVID positive. I don't know what to do about it. So I give them the other thing I do is I try to give short 1 or 2 sentence guidance on virtually everything. I don't give them a whole page to read because I know they're not going to read through it. They're all excited. So I give them bullet points. Do this, do that, do this. So they feel comfortable because they have guidance that's simple and easy to implement. When the upper administration, and honestly, our upper administration comes out with these page-long, this is what you do in this case. I know the faculty scanning it, they're trying to get through it quick, but they don't pick it up. It just gets them agitated. I don't understand what they mean by this. I don't understand this. So the simpler you make it, the more effective it will be. And then I also tell them, in the end, you're a pretty bright man or woman. Use your common sense. What would you do? What would you tell your kids to do? So you do that, and I'll back it up. And so we're doing a lot of that kind of stuff. But you are right. The socialization, I mean, not the socialization, but the angst that faculty feel, not only students, but faculty feel is quite amazing. And department chairs in particular, because they have faculty, and they're not used to being the sort of moral compass and ethical compass and health compass for their faculty. That's a new role for them. And many of them have not been in that role before, and they're like, well, I don't know what to do. And but it's making better department heads. They're becoming, again, more flexible, more able to handle stress, because once stress becomes part of you, that is, stress is no longer stress, it's just being comfortable with being uncomfortable. I mean, that's what stress is all about, right? You get comfortable with it, then it's not stressful anymore, and you say, okay. When things went wrong on the shuttle, we one time had an engine that went full on, and the shuttle's going head over teacups, going around and around and around. And we knew we couldn't land that way. But, I remember the commander saying, oh, here we go again, another issue. And that's about and we just sort of laughed, and everybody fixed it. Now, it took us 8 hours to fix it. And of course, we could have looked at it and said, well, if we can't fix it, we're dead, But we didn't. We just were so used to that kind of no stress environment that we would just say, okay, here it goes again, another issue. Let's figure out what it is and get it done. And I'd like to get it done so I can have dinner tonight, that kind of thing. So I think as we train our staff and faculty to be more like that. I mean, they're not going to be, it's not a life or death thing here for faculty, so it's not as intense, and I understand that. But the flip side of it is, if we adopt that kind of, and your faculty adopts that kind of attitude, then all these problems will just become another step on the journey as they learn how to have fun with their life, enjoy what they're doing, be excited about teaching the next generation of engineers and scientists. And it's an opportunity to reinvigorate yourself and learn things. A lot of us get locked into the old style. And yeah, we're comfortable with it, but I think a lot of people now are getting very comfortable with being uncomfortable, and they're learning things. I'll have people call me and say, hey, I get this idea. What do you think if we can I talk to the chairs about doing this way? And I always say, sure, let's do it. And we have some lively discussions on how to do labs. Of course, that's a big one all the time. And I gave you the things we're doing now, but I don't think that's working. Maybe we can do this together with that. Or maybe, I heard, Harvard was doing this or MIT was doing that. Why don't we try to do this? And so there's constant change, and the students have to change. And again, what they're getting used to is changing all the time. And so they're becoming a lot more versatile, a lot more quick to learn, a lot more being in charge and interactive with their own education. And all of that is good. All of that's going to produce a very good professional. Someone that's versatile, creative, and have the ability to adapt to whatever circumstance they're in and whatever they need to learn. So it's all good from my point.
Right. So definitely change is good. Change is healthy. And we don't have to be stressed about it. I think that I will quote you on that.
Exactly. I mean, it's actually fun when you get into it. You say, oh, this one, I didn't expect that. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. So we have another question from the audience, and it says like, okay, under these new circumstances, considering the constraints and restrictions that some universities or higher education institutions might have, and considering the new modalities or the new methodologies in terms of teaching experiences and also education, what is your opinion in terms of these institutions with these restrictions needs to transform in terms of their organization or their functioning? I mean, the way it's like we have been adopting all these education methodologies, these new technologies, but of course there might be restrictions in terms of resources, in terms of physical space, or technological capabilities. So, do you think that organizations with this restriction definitely need to transform in terms of the way that they operate and the way that they function?
Yes, I do. That's when I started talking to you about redoing classrooms. You may not need as many buildings, all that kind of stuff. I think the big problem that we still have, and we have it here in the U.S. for sure, is we're trying to superimpose the old organization for universities on the new reality of tomorrow, and it's not going to fit. So what we really need to do is form teams that say, okay, given the fact that we're going to have to change. Now, part of the problem is not everybody thinks we're going to have to change. They think once we get a cure for this, everything will go back to the way it was. I don't think that will ever happen. I personally think, yeah, there'll be a movement towards that, but we've taken, as they say, the cap off the bottle, right? You can't put it back on. The genie's out, right? The genie's out of the bottle. And the students are going to demand more. The faculty is going to be in tune with more things. So it's got to change. So I do think we need to reorganize the university. And it's going to change the entire cost structure. I don't think we're going to need as many buildings. We're certainly not going to need them air conditioned or heated as much because we won't use them as much. There'll be learning spaces, so we'll use them at times. But we'll be doing a lot more stuff digitally in the future. So it's going to change the cost structure, what we charge for education. It's also going to change what we pay faculty members, quite honestly, because the faculty members that adapt to this are going to be worth a lot of money. The faculty members that keep trying to do the old things are going to be retired out. They're going to have to move them out because we're not going to be that way. We're not going to be those 1800 and 1700 universities from 200 years ago, 300 years ago, 500 years ago. We're going to be different. And yeah, it's going to take time to change because we have these structures that were built for an old paradigm, but it is going to have to be addressed. And I believe the universities that quickly adopt will be the new MITs, Caltechs, Sorbonnes. It won't be the existing ones. It will be whoever adapts to this new reality and how students learn better, how faculty teach better, how it's more effective, interactive learning, creativity. But it's going to be hard because, everybody wants to be the way it used to be because that's comfortable. And I keep coming back to you've got to be uncomfortable with, comfortable with being uncomfortable, not comfortable with being the same old, same old. You've got to be comfortable with change, comfortable with stress. And once you are, then all of this stuff becomes easy to do. You can reorganize. But I do agree, that's a very insightful question. We really need to change. And it's going to be a lot, at least in the U.S., which is different, I know, than many of the universities represented here. But in the U.S., the cost structure is going to have to reduce because we don't need the so-called, what we call the college experience. We don't need people face-to-face in a big classroom. It's not effective, right? We do need them face-to-face doing problems and hands-on stuff. So it will shift. So the classrooms of tomorrow will not look like the classrooms of today. They'll be very interactive. There'll be group learning, a lot of group learning, people learning from each other with the faculty member as a catalyst, as a conduit to have them learn. And that's going to mean that lighting is going to be different. The heating and cooling requirements are going to be different. The number of buildings you need is going to be significantly less, in my opinion. The cost of technology, though, is going to increase. You're going to have very large bandwidth. Students are going to have, you're going to have to address, as we begin to go into these three-dimensional imaging computer systems, students are not always going to be able to afford those. So you're going to have to supplement the students on getting their own equipment, because a lot of the learning is going to occur at their home where they are. It's going to affect dormitory space. I mean, do you really need dorms? No, I don't need it. I can learn from home, right? I don't need those spaces. So it's going to change a lot, but we have to do it. I mean, one of the things when I say that, I always cringe, because the dormitories are a great place for students to socialize. And we can't forget that we're not just producing a technical guy, a lady that's super, but they have to also be able to integrate and talk to each other in a meaningful way, be a human being, have social understanding of each other and how it is to work with people. Part of that will come through the team learning approach, where we'll have all their learning done in teams, so they'll have to interact with different personalities. Some people get things done early, some people put it off, all that kind of stuff. All of that is important to their learning to be a human being and to integrate in society. But we may be able to get around that socialization too by requiring them to go out in the community and work with their local communities, wherever they happen to be. They don't have to be in the town the universities had. For example, in our town, we had a lot of people work in the Dallas area, Houston area, not in Lubbock, 500 miles away, but they still get a socialization with those communities. So it helps the community. It also, by the way, one of the things we learned with COVID is that students will then come back and say, I was working with this group and I think I can develop a better, machine that's going to package food better than they have there. And why don't we do that as a senior project, right? So it may drive social innovation that normally would not come through the normal process, but students seeing a need and saying, boy, I can address that. That's pretty cool. That's easy to do. So we can help society as a way. So I think this, I keep coming back to, and I know people look at me like I'm weird. I keep coming back to this COVID is forcing us out of our comfort zone, and that's a very good thing. And it's making us address a lot of social issues. It's making us address a lot of issues of what does the engineer of the future need to be? And I believe that person needs to be creative, innovative, flexible, and also has to have a very strong connection to society and needs to use those technical skills, his God-given skills or her God-given skills, to help the community in which they live. And part of what we're doing here by having them work in their communities is getting them excited about that. Kids love that. They get in and they start bagging stuff and they start helping old people and they go, wow, this is pretty cool. And they get rewards from that, and then they think, well, we're doing a lot with the hospitals. We're working closer to with our medical school than ever before. We're making 3D printed masks. I mean, I have one here we're giving out to local communities, right? All our students have done that. We're making intubators, ventilators, new mask concepts, all sorts of stuff. And we're having people donate the money to do it. And we're giving it out to all the small communities that don't have very much money around West Texas. And it's a way to get our kids involved and use their technical skills. And that drives them to learn more. So they learn in YouTube videos. They say, well, I didn't learn this in class, but there's a YouTube video on this. And that drives the faculty to learn more, because the faculty is saying, what? I didn't cover that in class. What video did you have? And so it's driving education across the board. So I think this is, it's an exciting time to be in education. I think all of us are sick of being home. That's the socialization part. I'm sick of being by myself. I spend my time by myself all the time, looking at myself and drinking my coffee, and that's it. But I'm also trying to motivate our kids and motivate our faculty to not look at this as an end point or something we have to do now as a punishment, but much more like this is an opportunity to change, and this is a great opportunity to become better than we ever were before. And that's that journey part you said at the very beginning of this. You know, it's not the end, it's the journey that's important. And I think that journey we're going through, and we're forced to go through, which unfortunately is the way human beings are often forced to make changes. I mean, this is going to drive educational pedagogy for the next 50 years or beyond. And so those of us that get on the train, get on it and get excited about it, we're going to be the winners. And the people that try to superimpose the old way of doing business, they're going to be the losers. And so I don't know about you, but I want to be one of the winners, you know, and we've got to get our faculty involved, and I think they are getting involved a little bit at a time. I mean, everybody's, you know, it's tough. It's not the norm, and but it's got to become the norm. It's got to become you're comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Okay, we are almost about to land in terms of the timing. So I want to take another question from the audience. It's basically related that since our campus, our physical campus, it might not be attractive right now for our prospective students, how you are dealing in terms of admissions in developing strategies to, you know, bring your local or international students to the programs, not using the traditional campus approach that we used to have.
What we're doing a variety of different things. The thing that's most important is I have every department head contacting every student that indicates they're interested in that discipline. So personal contact. And the great part about Zoom and all these different webinars that we're using is that you can contact anybody anywhere in the world, see them face to face, and answer their questions in a personal way. So in a way, what we're doing is we're reaching out to everybody and we're saying, what do you want to know about chemical engineering? What do you want to know about mechanical engineering? I'm the department head, and I get involved. We have what they call here red radio orientation. We get everybody that's interested in applying to tech to come here, and we'll answer questions. And they'll introduce me as the dean, and I'll say, let me tell you about what we're doing at Texas Tech. Let me tell you the excitement here. And we're also have available to them, or we're putting together virtual tours of all the buildings, virtual tours of the laboratories, so they can come in and see the facilities. They can see everything without actually being here. But a lot of it, and our recruiting, by the way, has been very good. We have more graduate students and undergraduates than we had last year. We have more graduate students than we've had the last 4 years apply, even though some of them can't get visas to get here. But what we're doing is we're connecting them electronically and saying, you're going to take your courses electronically, but then you're going to integrate right into the program when this opens up in the spring or in the summer, whenever it opens up. But most of our success has been around personal outreach. So for example, I can talk to, and I've talked to groups of 100, 130 kids in Brazil. And it's all on Zoom or all on whatever their local webinar is. And I'll say, what do you want to know about tech? They'll ask me questions. They'll see my face. I see their face. We talk to each other. It's much more about personal contact than it is about anything else. So the way we recruit is we recruit by personal contact with the deans, with the department heads. If they want to talk to a specific faculty as a graduate student, we'll ask the faculty member to set up a Zoom meeting with them, set up a face-to-face meeting with them, and talk to them. Now, in the past, they never had that. They'd have to come here, set up something, and that kind of thing. So it's actually worked better for us than the old way of doing it. And we're thinking of continuing this way. I'm trying to convince the faculty, because it is very time intensive. But we have this personal touch has really worked well. We do a lot of texting. If they give us their number, we'll text them and say, hey, what do you want to know? Who do you want to talk to? What facilities do you have? What's going on? We just have a lot of personal touch. Outreach to the students it works better than going through buildings and tours and all that kind of stuff. It works a lot better, the personal touch. One-on-one works better. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's what we're doing.
Yeah, It answered the question. I think it's, I mean, your experience and your vision on that is pretty well aligned with what we're living all of our colleges and academic programs. I think that definitely the personal touch, the direct communication one by one is the key aspects of this. And you know, I mean, I think it has been a great discussion. I think that we have the chance to discuss the different roles that we have under these circumstances. The role as a faculty, the role as a department chair, the role as a dean, the role as an overall program as a college. And also we have been able to discuss the role of these new technologies and new methodologies, you know, in the classroom, in our academic environment, and the future of it, right? I think that, but the most important thing for me is like, as you said, we are in a journey. We have in constant change. We don't have to fear about the change. I mean, change is good. Change is healthy. That's something that I remember. But these all discussions remind me of a professor's blog that I read a couple of weeks ago. And he was doing a parallel or a simile in this way, like we are doing our best, we are using all the technologies, we are improving our experiences, we are adopting a lot of methodologies, teaching methodologies under these new circumstances, and trying to build the best scenario for our students. And the comparison is like we're doing and we are using all the tools like an architect uses to design and build the best possible house, right? The best possible house to bring the people that you're interested to come to your place, right? And at the very end, we have a big house, big spaces, you know, a lot of technology embedded on it. But we must not forget that if our interest is also to receive all the persons in our house, we must not forget that we have to be a very good host, right? A very good host, perhaps having a big house. So again, for me, it has been a big honor to be your host today and share your experiences with the audience. I think that is a very valuable time, a perfect time for our academic programs here in Colombia, from the international audiences that I'm pretty sure that are also part of the agenda. And again, thank you very much for your insights. I hope to see you soon. Probably, who knows, in person. But we don't know what this journey has for us. So thank you again very much for all your time and all your valuable comments for us.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you guys and ladies and fellow professionals, and we're in this journey together. That's the other thing I think this will do, is bring the world together a lot closer because we're all facing the same problems. I think that's a good thing too. Hopefully our governments will be smart enough to do it, but the bottom line is it's a great opportunity for us to work together, figure out best practices, help each other, because in the end, no matter where the great discoveries come, we'll all benefit from them. So I'm looking to produce the best engineers in the world. You're looking to produce the best engineers, and I don't care who does it. It's going to make my life easier, your life easier and better and sustainable, and this planet much more environmentally friendly in the long term. So I'm excited about the kids that we're going to produce, the students we're going to produce. I'm excited about the faculty getting re-engaged with education, having discussions about what to do and how to do it in a very passionate way. I think all that's great. So I appreciate the opportunity, and I'd love to visit you sometime. Love you guys to visit me. Please let me know anytime if you want to. Hopefully sometime this spring or summer we'll be through this, but I hope we don't lose the lessons. I don't think we will. I think the universities that adapt to the new reality of how to teach and how to do things more effectively will in the end be the winners out of this. So thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you.